Aden was born in the bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria, where the shimmering lights of the city reflected the vibrant life of the people. Her mother, Monike, was a market trader, while her father, Adikona, worked in construction. From the moment Aden came into the world, her beauty radiated, with eyes that seemed to hold the stars and a smile that could light up a room. But beneath the glow of her innocence, an air of tension brewed in her home. Monike had always desired a son, someone to carry on the family name and provide for them in old age. When Aden was born, her disappointment was palpable. Adikona, too, quietly distanced himself. Over time, the love and care that should have been poured into their only child slowly turned into resentment. Despite her radiant spirit, Aden felt the coldness. Yet, she continued to smile, believing her parents would one day love her as she loved them. As Aden grew, so did her responsibilities. By the time she was 6, her parents demanded she wake early to sweep the compound, fetch water from the distant well, and help with chores far beyond her years. While other children played joyfully, Aden toiled. Neighbors would often whisper, "How can they treat such a bright child so harshly?" Still, Aden was filled with a quiet resilience. She found solace in the stories the elders told by the fireside. Stories of ancestors, gods, and powerful spirits who once roamed the lands. She would sit at the feet of the storytellers, soaking in every word, and in her heart, she began to dream. One night, an old woman in the market, who had noticed Aden's mistreatment, stopped her. "Little one," she said, "the gods have not forgotten you." Aden, though confused, smiled politely and continued her tasks, not yet understanding the power of those words. By the time Aden was 12, the tension between her and her parents reached a boiling point. Her mother's voice grew harsher, and her father's silence more deafening. One evening, after a minor mistake, Monike lashed out at her daughter with cruel words. "You are nothing but a burden to this family. If only you had been a son, things would have been different." Her words struck deep, and that night, Aden wept alone in her small room. She tried to understand what she had done to deserve such treatment, but no answers came. The walls of her home, once a place of refuge, now felt like a prison. Aden, in her quiet moments, began to plot her escape. She longed for a life beyond the confines of her family's expectations, a life where she could be free. The day finally came when Aden's parents could no longer hide their disdain. Monike and Adikana called her into the parlor, their faces stern. "We can no longer afford to keep you," her mother announced coldly. "You are old enough to fend for yourself." With that, they handed her a small bundle of clothes and a few naira bills. It was a cruel abandonment, one that shattered the last bit of hope Aden held for reconciliation. They sent her away to a distant village, far from the city, to live with an aunt she barely knew. As Aden left her childhood home, her heart ached with both sorrow and anger. But even as tears streamed down her face, she felt a strange sense of relief, freedom, at last. The journey to Ibis, the rural village where her aunt Lay lived, was long and tiring. Aden had never been outside of Lagos, and the lush green landscape, dotted with ancient trees and rolling hills, felt foreign to her. The air was cooler, and the roads less traveled, but there was a beauty in the simplicity of it all. Her aunt welcomed her with open arms. Unlike her parents, Aunt Lay was a warm-hearted woman with an infectious laugh. She lived modestly, tending to her farm and selling produce at the local market. Though the house was small, it was filled with warmth, something Aden hadn't felt in years. For the first time in her life, Aden felt seen and cared for. Aunt Lay's kindness began to heal the wounds in her heart, and soon, she found herself embracing the simple life of the village. Life in Ibis was peaceful, but it didn't come without its mysteries. The villagers spoke of the sacred forest that bordered the village, a place where spirits were said to dwell. children were warned never to go too deep into the woods, for the spirits could be both kind and mischievous. One evening, as Aden sat by the fire with Aunt Lay, she heard the wind whistle through the trees. It seemed to call her name softly. She asked her aunt about it, but Aunt Lay simply smiled. "The forest knows who you are, my dear. It remembers things long forgotten by man." Aden didn't fully understand, but the words stayed with her. That night, she dreamed of a glowing path deep within the forest, a place where her destiny lay hidden. Months passed, and Aden grew stronger, both in body and spirit. She had learned the ways of the farm, helped her aunt with the market trade, and had even made a few friends in the village. Life had taken on a rhythm that brought her peace. One afternoon, while returning from the market, Aden met a stranger on the road. He was tall, with skin the color of dark cocoa and eyes that sparkled like stars. His voice was deep and calming, and when he spoke, it was as though the wind itself had carried his words. "I have been watching you, Aden," he said mysteriously. Startled, Aden stepped back. "Who are you?" He smiled gently. "I am someone who knows your story, and I come with a message. You are destined for greatness, but first, you must walk a path filled with trials. Be strong, for the gods have not forgotten you." And just like that, the man disappeared, leaving Aden both frightened and curious. The stranger's words haunted Aden. Though she tried to carry on with her daily tasks, a sense of foreboding followed her. One evening, while walking by the edge of the forest, she noticed something shimmering in the distance. Against her better judgment, she followed the light. As she entered the sacred forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, and the air grew thick with magic. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, "Aden, daughter of Lagos, do you seek your destiny?" Aden's heart raced. "Who speaks?" "I am the guardian of this forest. If you wish to claim your future, you must prove your worth." Without warning, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and a massive creature emerged from the shadows, a lion, its golden eyes fixed on her. This was her first test, and she had no choice but to face it head-on. Aden stood frozen as the lion approached, its presence commanding. But as it drew nearer, it did not attack. Instead, it circled her slowly, as if measuring her spirit. The lion's eyes, though fierce, held wisdom beyond the word of men. "You fear what you do not understand," it said, its voice a deep rumble. "But fear is the first barrier to greatness." Aden, though trembling, found her voice. "I do not wish to be afraid. I want to know my path." The lion nodded. "Then you must first learn that power is not found in the strength of your arms but in the strength of your heart." With those words, the lion faded into the trees, leaving behind a single, golden feather. Aden picked it up, feeling its warmth. This was the first gift of her journey, a symbol of courage. Upon returning to the village, Aden sensed that something had changed. The villagers, once so open and welcoming, seemed to look at her with new eyes. Whispers followed her wherever she went. One day, Aunt Lay pulled her aside and explained, "There is more to this village than meets the eye, Aden. Ibis was built on ancient magic, and it appears that you have been chosen." "Chosen?" Aden echoed, her mind racing. "For what?" But Aunt Lay simply smiled and said, "The answers will come in time. For now, trust the path the spirits have set before you." Though she didn't fully understand, Aden knew that her life in Ibis was far more intertwined with the spirit world than she had ever imagined. But there was no turning back now, the winds of destiny were already guiding her. Weeks passed, and Aden's encounters with the mystical only grew. Every night, the winds whispered her name, and strange dreams filled her sleep. In one dream, she saw herself standing before a mighty river, its waters filled with stars. On the other side was a grand city made of gold and light. But before she could cross, a storm rose, shaking the earth and darkening the skies. Aden woke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. The storm, she realized, was coming not just in her dreams, but in reality. The village elders sensed it too. They gathered one evening, speaking in hushed tones about the silent storm that had been foretold. But no one knew what form it would take or when it would strike. All Aden knew was that she would have a role to play in facing it. A few days after the storm dream, Aden was summoned to meet the village elders. They were the oldest and wisest in Ibis, keepers of ancient knowledge passed down through generations. As Aden stood before them, she felt small, like a child again. "We have watched you, Aden," the head elder, Baba Ojo, said. "The spirits have spoken. You are to be the protector of this village." Aden's eyes widened. "Me? But I don't know how." "The strength you need is already within you," Baba Ojo replied. "You are not ordinary. Your connection to the spiritual realm is strong, and you will learn to harness it. But first, you must complete 3 trials." The weight of their words sank into her bones. She had come to Ibis seeking refuge, but now it seemed her destiny was far greater than she had ever imagined. Aden's first trial came sooner than expected. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky, the village was plunged into darkness. Shadows crept from the forest, twisting and writhing like living creatures. Panic spread, but Aden stood firm. Baba Ojo's voice echoed in her mind, "Face your fears, and they will lose their power." Summoning all her courage, Aden walked into the heart of the darkness. The shadows whispered her deepest insecurities, mocking her abandonment, her fears of being unloved and unwanted. But Aden had grown stronger. She remembered the lion's lesson: power lay in her heart, not her fear. With a deep breath, she spoke into the darkness, "I am not afraid." The shadows recoiled, dissolving into nothingness. Aden had passed her first trial, and the village breathed a sigh of relief. After facing the shadows, Aden began to notice subtle changes within herself. Her senses were sharper, and she could feel the energy of the earth beneath her feet. The village, once so ordinary, now pulsed with hidden life. She could hear the voices of the wind, the whispers of the trees, and the hum of the rivers. Aunt Lay, noticing the change, revealed a secret. "You come from a long line of seers, Aden. Your mother and father may have rejected you, but your true inheritance lies in the spiritual realm. The gifts you have now are only the beginning." Aden was stunned. Her parents had kept this from her, hiding her true lineage out of fear or ignorance. But now, she understood that her journey was not one of abandonment, it was one of discovery. And her path to greatness had only just begun. The second trial took Aden to the river she had seen in her dreams, the river of time. The elders warned her that crossing it was perilous, for the river showed not only the past but also the future. It was said that those who could not handle the truth it revealed would be swept away by its current. With a deep breath, Aden approached the water. As she stepped in, the river's surface shimmered, revealing scenes from her past, her parents' cruelty, her tears, her loneliness. But she did not falter. She had already lived through these pains. Then, the river shifted, showing her a vision of the future. She saw herself standing tall, clothed in gold, with the people of Ibis gathered around her. But there was also a darkness, a figure lurking in the background, waiting to strike. Aden emerged from the river, her heart heavy with the knowledge that danger still lay ahead. In the days following her second trial, Aden's visions became more frequent. She saw glimpses of her parents, now struggling in Lagos, their business failing and their home falling into disrepair. Though they had abandoned her, she couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. Meanwhile, in Ibis, tensions were rising. Strange occurrences plagued the village, crops withered, animals fell ill, and unease settled over the people. The elders believed it was the work of a malevolent spirit, one that sought to undo all the good Aden had done. As Aden prepared for her third trial, she knew that whatever force was behind the village's troubles would soon reveal itself. And when it did, she would need all her strength to protect the people she had come to love. One evening, as Aden sat by the fire, the stranger from the road appeared once more. His eyes were as piercing as before, but this time, there was a sense of urgency in his voice. "The time is near, Aden. The storm you dreamt of is coming." Aden nodded, her heart steady. "I am ready." The stranger smiled. "You are stronger than you know. But remember, not all battles are fought with strength alone. Some require wisdom, others compassion." With that, he handed her a small, intricately carved stone. "This will guide you when the time comes. Trust it." And just like that, the stranger was gone again, leaving Aden with more questions than answers. But she held the stone tightly, knowing that it would play a crucial role in the final battle. The night of the final trial arrived. The village gathered around the sacred fire as Baba Ojo led Aden to the edge of the forest. "This is where your journey truly begins," he said. "The spirit you must face is the one that haunts your lineage. It is not a spirit of the land, it is a spirit of your past." Aden stepped into the darkness, her heart pounding. She soon found herself standing before a towering figure, its face obscured by shadows. "You have carried the weight of your family's neglect for too long," it whispered. "But can you truly forgive them?" Aden's chest tightened. Forgive them? The parents who had cast her aside. But as she stood there, holding the carved stone in her hand, she realized the truth. Her strength lay not in vengeance, but in letting go. With a deep breath, she whispered, "I forgive them." The spirit let out a wail, then dissolved into the night. Aden had passed the final trial. The night after the final trial, the storm Aden had long feared finally arrived. Dark clouds rolled in, and the winds howled through the village, tearing at rooftops and sending animals into a frenzy. Lightning split the sky, and the ground trembled beneath the weight of the storm. But this was no ordinary weather. As Aden stood in the center of the village, she could feel the malevolent spirit lurking in the air. It had not been defeated, only driven back. Now, it had returned with a vengeance. The elders gathered, and Baba Ojo spoke solemnly. "This storm is the work of the spirit you faced. It seeks to destroy all that you have built here." Aden knew this was her greatest test yet. She had faced her fears, forgiven her past, and now she had to defend her future. The storm intensified, and the spirit, now fully manifest, rose from the center of the village like a swirling mass of darkness. Its voice boomed across the land, filled with rage. "You may have passed the trials, Aden, but you cannot defeat me." Aden stood firm, the carved stone clutched in her hand. She had faced this spirit before, and now she understood its true nature. It fed on fear, on pain, on unresolved anger. But she no longer carried those burdens. "I do not fear you," Aden said, her voice steady. "You have no power over me." The spirit howled, but it was no longer as strong as it once had been. With each passing moment, its form began to fade. The villagers, inspired by Aden's courage, joined her, chanting words of strength and unity. Together, they pushed the spirit back into the darkness. When the storm finally passed, the village was left in silence. The spirit had been defeated, and the air felt lighter, freer. The people of Ibis gathered around Aden, their faces filled with awe and gratitude. She had saved them, not through brute strength, but by facing her fears and embracing her true self. Baba Ojo approached her with a proud smile. "You have done well, Aden. The village owes you a great debt. But your journey is not over." Aden, though weary, nodded. She knew that while she had faced many trials, her path to greatness was still unfolding. There were still unanswered questions, especially about her family and the life she had left behind. With the village safe and the spirit defeated, Aden began to feel a pull towards her past. The visions of her parents had grown stronger, and she knew it was time to return to Lagos, the city of her birth. Though she had built a new life in Ibis, her journey would not be complete until she confronted the family that had abandoned her. Aunt Lay, though sad to see her go, understood. You have to close the circle, Aden. But remember, you are no longer the girl who was cast aside. You have become something far greater. With those words in her heart, Aden packed her belongings and set off for Lagos. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever awaited her. When Aden arrived in Lagos, she found the city much as she had left it, busy, chaotic, and full of life. But her family's home was a shadow of what it once was. The walls were cracked, the garden overgrown, and a sense of despair hung in the air. Her parents, once proud and prosperous, were now struggling. Their business had failed, and they were barely scraping by. Aden stood at the gate for a long time, watching them from a distance. They looked older, wearier, and there was a sadness in their eyes that hadn't been there before. She could have turned away, leaving them to their fate. But instead, she walked up to the door and knocked, ready to face the people who had once cast her out. When her parents opened the door, they didn't recognize her at first. Aden, now a young woman of strength and grace, was a far cry from the timid girl they had sent away. But as they looked into her eyes, realization dawned. Aden, her mother whispered, her voice filled with shock and regret. Her father said nothing, his face a mix of shame and sorrow. They had expected her to be lost, forgotten, but here she was, standing before them like a beacon of light. Aden could see the pain in their eyes, and in that moment, she understood the full extent of their regret. You abandoned me, Aden said quietly, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I have found my way, despite everything. Her parents hung their heads, unable to meet her gaze. Aden's mother, Monike, broke the silence first. We were wrong, Aden. So very wrong. We thought sending you away would be better for you, but we were selfish. Her father, Adikana, nodded, his eyes filled with tears. We failed you, daughter. And we have suffered for it every day since. Aden could hear the sincerity in their voices, the weight of their mistakes hanging heavy in the air. It wasn't the apology she had dreamed of as a child, but it was enough. She had learned on her journey that forgiveness was not for the benefit of others, it was for herself. I forgive you, she said softly, and with those words, a great burden lifted from her heart. The past was no longer a chain around her neck. She was free. With forgiveness came a new chapter in Aden's life. Her parents, humbled by their fall and grateful for her return, asked her to stay with them, to help rebuild what had been lost. But Aden knew that her place was no longer in their home. She had found her own path, her own strength. I will help you, Aden said, but I cannot stay. Her parents, though saddened, understood. They had lost the right to demand anything from her long ago. Instead, they accepted her offer of help with gratitude and humility. Over the next few weeks, Aden used the wisdom and skills she had gained in Ibis to help her parents rebuild their business. She introduced new ideas, modernized their operations, and slowly but surely, they began to regain their footing. As Aden helped her parents, she realized that her true gift was not just in spiritual matters, but also in leadership and business. She had a natural talent for bringing people together and creating opportunities where none had existed before. With the money she had saved from her time in Ibis, Aden decided to start her own business. It began as a small market stall, selling goods from the village, but quickly grew into something much larger. Soon, she was trading across Lagos, building a network of suppliers and customers that spanned the entire city. Her business flourished, and with it, her influence. People began to recognize her not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as a wise and compassionate leader. She became a symbol of hope for many, especially for those who had been forgotten or cast aside. Though Adan's business thrived in Lagos, her heart longed for Ibis. The village had become her true home, a place of peace and belonging. After ensuring that her parents were stable and her business could run without her, she decided to return to the village that had given her so much. When she arrived, the people of Ibis welcomed her with open arms. She was no longer just Adan, the girl who had been abandoned. She was Adan, the protector of the village, the woman who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. Aunt Lay, her beloved aunt, greeted her with tears of joy. "I always knew you would return, my dear," she said, pulling Adan into a tight embrace. "Ibis is where you belong." To celebrate Adan's return, the village held a grand festival. The Festival of Light was an ancient tradition, meant to honor those who had overcome great trials and emerged stronger. The entire village was illuminated with lanterns and candles, and the air was filled with music and laughter. Adan, now a woman of great standing, was the guest of honor. As she sat by the fire, watching the festivities, she felt a deep sense of contentment. She had come so far from the scared, abandoned girl she once was. Now, she was a woman of strength, wisdom, and compassion. But the festival was not just a celebration of her return, it was also a reminder that the light within each of us can never be extinguished, no matter how dark the world may seem. With her return to Ibis, Adan decided to use her newfound wealth and influence to help the village flourish. She invested in the community, building schools, improving infrastructure, and creating opportunities for the people. Under her guidance, Ibis grew from a small, quiet village into a thriving center of trade and culture. Adan's reputation spread far and wide, and soon, people from all over Nigeria came to seek her counsel. She had become not just a businesswoman, but a leader, a beacon of hope for those who had been forgotten, just as she once had been. But despite her success, Adan never forgot the lessons she had learned. She remained humble, always remembering the trials she had faced and the people who had helped her along the way. One day, as Adan sat in her office, she received an unexpected visit. Her parents, now older and frailer, had come to Ibis. They had heard of her success, of the empire she had built, and had come to ask for her help once more. Adan was surprised to see them, but not unkind. She welcomed them into her home, offering them food and drink. Her parents, humbled by their journey and by the daughter they had once abandoned, spoke with quiet voices. "We need your help again," her father said, his voice shaking. "Our business, it's failing, and we don't know what to do." Adan listened carefully, her heart filled with compassion. They had hurt her deeply, but she had already forgiven them. Now, it was time to show them the true meaning of family. Adan could have easily turned her parents away, leaving them to deal with the consequences of their actions. But that was not who she had become. She had grown beyond bitterness and anger. Instead, she chose mercy. "I will help you," she said softly. "But only if you promise to learn from your mistakes."